I think we got some really great responses. Some of them were like super technical in nature and kind of like expanded, and then some were completely out of left field. I didn't expect to get some of these answers at all. Welcome to the Cables2Clouds podcast. Cloud adoption is on the rise, and many network infrastructure professionals are being asked to adopt a hybrid approach. As individuals who have already started this journey, we would like to empower those professionals with the tools and the knowledge to bridge the gap. Hey everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the Cables2Clouds podcast. My name is Chris at BGP Main on Twitter and only Twitter. And then we have Alex Perkins, who is at Bumps in the Wire on Twitter.
Only on X.
Not X. Nope, he's not on X.
What's X?
He's never joined X. He's only been on Twitter his entire life. Tim McConaughey at Juan Golbez on Twitter as well. So today we have a very special episode that we put together for you guys. So we're recording this in March 2024, and we have literally just, I think, the other day celebrated 1 year of this podcast. So we all right, include all the sound effects for the noisemakers and party hats and things like that. So so we've officially hit 1 year, and it's been amazing. So we started this, came in under A1, who's been so supportive, and we've been reaching out to listeners, and the responses from you guys have just been so great. So first of all, big thank you to you guys for helping us get to 1 year. But to kind of celebrate this, we wanted to do something special for our 1 year episode. So what we've done is, we've had a lot of great guests on the show, even within just the first year, who've really made an impact and resonated with our audience and things like that. So we wanted to bring them back and kind of do something fun. So for this episode, we've over the course of the past month, we've gotten together with a lot of our favorite guests that we've had on the show. We recorded a brief segment with each guest that we brought back on. So you'll see there's a whole list of them. We'll put it in the show notes. But we all wanted to ask them the exact same questions and kind of get their responses on a few different topics. So we will we'll get to that in a minute. But before we get into that, let's talk about our listener survey that we did earlier this year. So we don't want to spend too much time on this. We know, yet another survey. I'm sure, everyone has survey fatigue at times. So we do appreciate all the people that did fill out our listener survey. But we just want to kind of touch on some of the high points that we extracted from this to, let you know that we are listening. And we do want to incorporate some of that feedback into what we're doing today. So first piece of the listener survey responses that we'll touch on is kind of the demographic data about, who you guys are, who's listening to the show, and et cetera, right? So one quick thing I'll call out, because this one's an easy thing, and I think we put out the listener survey before we kind of changed anything with like adding the news segment and things like that. Is we had responses from people about how long you typically listen to the show. Thankfully, most of the responses, close to 45%, were right around in that 30 to 60 minute range. Some people in the 15 to 30 minute range, and other people saying it depends, which is good for us because now we've started a new segment that comes out on a fortnightly basis as well. And that's typically, we try to keep that one anywhere from, 20 to 30 minutes, not really going over the 30-minute mark. And then when we have a guest episode who has something to showcase, we try to give them at least 45 to 60 minutes. So, I think that's good information. We're definitely trying to align to that. How about anything else you guys want to touch on with regard to the listener demographic data?
Yeah. So actually, looking at a couple of them, something like the age stands out, right? Like 50% of the listeners are 35 to 44, which I think all of us are too, right? Like we all fill that age range.
Tim's barely in there, but
I am. I'm squeaking
might be on the upper side
of
the bar. Oh man. Well, Tim, you're in luck because the next highest percentage at 35.7% is 45 to 54. So
there you go.
And then we got 14.3%. The smallest chunk is 26 to 34. So
we need to touch in with the younger folks, the people getting into their field. So if you know someone that's just getting into tech, just getting into cloud specifically, recommend the podcast. See if they want to get into it. We'd like to kind of expand out that direction.
Yep, that's why we joined TikTok.
Yep, before it got banned. So
before it got banned, yes,
might be banned soon.
Yeah, no, pretty soon. By the time this comes out, maybe it will be. Who knows? Okay, so let's do a little bit more about so those are the age ranges. Let's talk about like the position and kind of where they are in their career. The overwhelming majority of people who listen to the podcast are individual contributors. Not really surprised. This is a networking focused podcast. We tend to skew very heavily on the individual contributor side. There's some upper management, director level, or exec. Even have a few apparently managers and like I said, director level people. So yeah, it's great to have all of you. And just right on the back of that, where are people in their career? Even split at 50% is seasoned vets. This skews exactly right with our with the response rate on the ages, right? So that none of this is surprising. So
for sure,
yeah, exactly. And then it's either I've been doing this forever or I'm a seasoned vet, which I'm not sure what the difference is, but that's the overwhelming majority there.
I will say, let's get into that, VP, president, C-suite. Let's start getting some of those listeners in here. Maybe our hot news takes will start bringing in some of those people.
Some angry people, perhaps.
Maybe. I think the episode we did with Joe would probably resonate much better with that audience than anything else we've done so far. But yeah. So that's good. So that's kind of the demographic data about you guys. So let's get into the tough stuff. What's your least favorite part about the show? I think one of the main things called out here is they just put, quote, "How you doing, Jim?" Which referring to the banter that we had at the beginning of every episode. It's like, "Hey, Tim, I've never talked to you. I haven't talked to you all week. How you doing, man?" When that's total bullshit. We've been
10 episodes about a trip to Japan.
I did finally go.
You went to Japan. You did it. Thankfully, we've kind of cut that out. We don't want to kind of waste time with a bit of that, but we've also had our news segment come in where we can kind of make sure we're maintaining the personal stuff and things like that. But we don't want to kind of feed that into our guest episodes, right? We want to make that all about the guests. They have something to say and we feel that's valuable. So we've kind of cut that out. Another piece that someone called out was long intros. And yeah, we get that. I myself was already, before I think I saw this, I was like, man, our intro's too long, man. And even it's only 30 seconds, but it's still too long. So
in this day and age,
yeah, too long. We're gonna release a new intro where it's the intro playing, and then the bottom is like that Subway Surfers game where the guys jumping on the trains. I don't know if you guys know what that is, but
this is a real game, honest.
But yeah, so we've re-recorded the intro. Actually, very soon we'll have one that's much more condensed and concise. So we're gonna definitely address that. One other thing is someone called out the language and saying that from time to time it kills the mood or dilutes our authority as professionals, etc. And while I will say that I understand the sentiment that it's not necessarily the choice of everyone that they'd want to speak like that or listen to people that speak like that, and I totally respect that and understand your opinion. But leading into kind of what people have said about their favorite parts about the show is the personalities, our candor with each other, our rapport. And, I'll be completely frank with you guys. We started this podcast because we wanted to be able to sit around and talk with our friends about technology and things that we like, right? And if we want this thing to feel authentic, we need to talk authentically and talk comfortably. Me, Tim, and Alex have been friends for a long time, and I'm sorry, man. This is how we're going to talk. I'm trying to be, I guess respectful with it, and where it's not, being added in for no effect or anything. But fact of the matter is, that's just how we talk. So I don't know how you guys feel. You want to kind of touch on any other favorite elements that our listeners pointed out from the show?
Favorite or least favorite?
I think we covered all the least favorite. Let's go into favorites.
Oh, right. Gotcha.
Real quick on the language thing, I just want to add something that basically you touched on, Chris, but as far as like being, sincere and having like a candid conversation, we've had a bunch of guests that I've just realized this as you were talking. We've also had guests that like during the middle of the episode, it just comes up and they're like, "Hey, are we allowed to cuss on here?" Right? So I think that lends itself to show that like sometimes it's just how the conversation flows when you're just
sometimes it's just the nature of the game.
Yeah, exactly.
There's an authenticity factor you definitely lose when you start, I won't say censoring, I think that's a strong word, but when you kind of ask people to self-regulate the message that they're trying to give. For sure. So right. Yeah, totally. And I get why you probably can't listen to this, in the car with your kids, certain episodes, sometimes, certainly. All right. So yeah, let's jump to what do people report as the thing they liked most about our show? Multiple people said, the host candor, personalities, chemistry. For speaking for myself, I really appreciate that. That's obviously a huge, benefit or bonus to knowing that, we're kind of hitting the right mark just by being authentic. So that's a big one for me.
They must not be listening to the episodes where Tim talks.
Probably not. I usually stay pretty quiet on these, so you can only find maybe one or two.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's the best part. I think, honestly, since we've broken out the news episodes, it really comes out a lot more in those because we're just riffing right off of the crazy news stories or, hype cycles that are everywhere. So I think if you like the personalities, definitely the news show brings out a lot more of that sometimes.
Yeah. And I, for one, am glad that we broke it out because we definitely had feedback that, hey, this timestamps your episode and people who download it a year from now are going to suffer through the news. So we completely agreed with that and we broke it out. And honestly, it's performed really well. Just let you know, like not related to the survey, but since we did that, it's actually been performing extremely well. So thank everyone both for continuing to support us on that and also for just, giving us that feedback because we definitely want to incorporate everybody's feedback wherever possible. You want to grab one of these other ones, Alex?
Yeah. Other favorite parts, right? Obviously the topics that we cover. This is super beneficial for us, right? So we can plan future shows. And overwhelmingly, it's pretty much all the same, which guests, technical episodes, and topical episodes. And I think, right, we used to do quite a few roundtable episodes. And I think we kind of use some of this feedback to really start targeting much more guest episodes. And Tim, you've talked about this a bunch, but like system designs, like much more episodes focused around specific topical things. So there's much more coming that fall into these three.
Yeah, I think, over the last year, I think we've had some stuff really perform really well and obviously really resonated with the audience that are more topical than technical, which is good. Like, I think the episode we had with Joe Anisic on, I think, was obviously not overly technical, but it really kind of touched on something that is adjacent to everything that we do within technology, right? But then we've also had ones where we kind of just really dive into a technical topic, and that's also done very well. So we kind of want to maintain that balance where we're touching on things that are, may not be technical in nature, but still very important to our day-to-day, lives professionally and personally. But then we also want to have some very, solutions focused stuff, right? Because that's what pays the bills for us, right? So we want to get back to that. And Tim, I don't know if there's anything you want to add on that. I know that was kind of something you were spearheading. Is there anything you want to touch on there?
Yeah, I mean, like the biggest thing I want to say is that we have a pretty good hopper of unreleased technical content with more on the way. So I couldn't have said it better. We want to hew, on right in the middle as much as possible. We want things to be topical and accessible to our whole audience, which may not be super technical in the cloud right now. But we also want to actually offer that technical knowledge and content for the people who are already doing cloud networking. So we're trying to strike a balance, and we want to know, basically, are we hitting the mark from our listeners?
Yeah, and just something I want to add to that real quick. There was also a response in the survey that we commonly will use acronyms and things like that and not explain what things are.
That's on us.
And that's on us. And if we've said it from the beginning, we were a podcast to help either focus on hybrid cloud networking, multi-cloud networking, and a lot of people are very early in that journey and may not know anything and everything. Hell, we certainly don't know everything, so we need to be better about actually articulating things that we're talking about and not leaving people lying unknowing what we're talking about. So we'll definitely be working on that. Anything else we want to touch on the listener survey real quick before we move on?
I think that's all of it.
Okay. I think one other thing that stood out to me is we had a question in there about where people are, where they are at work, necessarily, like what kind of projects and things like they're working on. And 50%, exactly 50% said that you guys are migrating to a cloud provider. I wonder if that means the other 50% are already migrated to a cloud provider. I don't know. Maybe
totally.
Maybe they haven't. But I thought that was an interesting point. So we're curious to hear from you guys, right? If any of this kind of sparks anything that you want, hell, if you want to talk about it, if you want to, we can talk to you on social media about it. We can talk, on the podcast. If you want to come on, if you have a topic you want to discuss with us, we'd be happy to have you. So let us know. Or if you just have ideas, definitely always open to that. Always have an inbox that's ready and waiting. So just let us know. All right. So with that, let's get to the fun part, the episode that I just told you about at the beginning. So we, have our elite group of guests coming back on to answer some of our a quick set of questions. And I think we got some really great responses. Some of them were like super technical in nature and kind of like expanded, and then some were completely out of left field. I didn't expect to get some of these answers at all. So it was a very good mix. So eager for you guys to hear it. So without that, let's get into the episode. All right, first question. Let's get a very quick, who are you and what do you do?
Hi, I'm Yvonne Sharp, and I lead the North American Infrastructure Modernization team for Google Cloud.
I'm Pete Limbus, and I'm a docs engineer at Upbound.
My name is William Collins. I work at a network startup called Alkira, where I help out doing anything from testing and validating automation things, think like Terraform, stuff like that. And I also ramble a lot at lots of events, and I prototype lots of things around cloud networking. I've even been known to help out on the sales side every now and then. Other than that, I run the Cloud Gambit podcast. And I do a little bit of LinkedIn learning content, which is a blast, which I'm not going to be able to do as much anymore because we're actually expecting our third child. So life is going to get much more busy.
Oh, congratulations.
Announcement.
Thank you.
Congrats, bro.
No way like a podcast to announce stuff like that. Eventually we'll tell family so they don't find out from the internet.
So my name is Stephen McNutt. And I've been like a computer nerd for a very long time. Like my first job where people paid me money was Microsoft, and that was Windows 95. So my first IT job, you could install Windows from a floppy diskette still. I'm like a graybeard. I've been around for forever. So currently I work for Cisco Systems as a cybersecurity technical solutions architect.
Hey, what's up? My name is DeJuan Lightfoot. I'm a developer advocate at AWS.
I am Shala. Across social media, I am Gifted Lane. These days, more and more, I see myself as a edutainer. People like to call me an educator. I like to tell them, no, I'm not. I just like sharing my journey. But apparently I'm teaching people, but in a fun way. So fine, I'm an edutainer. I like to also think of myself as a cloud advocate these days.
Hey everyone, I'm Andrew Brown, and I create cloud certification content, run cloud boot camps, and just overall cause cloud drama online.
Hey everybody, my name is Chris Williams. I am the developer advocate manager for HashiCorp for North America, and I am also an AWS hero and a VMware vExpert.
All right, second question for you. What is something that you feel worked better on-prem than it does in the cloud?
All right. Well, worked better. Like that's an interesting question. So there are some use cases that only make sense very, very close to the user. So it's why we still hear a lot about edge, and even your cloud providers have edge solutions. So there are instances where you have a very latency sensitive application where you have an app that, or there's a business risk if there's a loss in connectivity. There are locations that require low connectivity or that have low connectivity. And there you have to have a solution that can be on premises. It's just a requirement. So I would say when I'm thinking about what maybe doesn't make sense to run in the cloud, those are the first use cases that I think of.
Yeah, that's a great point. Especially edge is becoming a topic that I'm seeing people talk about more and more, like every day, it seems like. So I think that's a good one.
Yeah, it's huge in retail. If you have, think of a subway, right? There's a subway in every little corner of the country, and a lot of those corners of the country don't have great connectivity. So you still have to be able to process orders, even if you're having connectivity challenges. And so a lot of edge is huge in retail. There are also big use cases even in telco or manufacturing, but there are lots of times and circumstances where you just have to have your compute resources really, really close to the end user.
Yeah, manufacturing was the first use case I thought of because that's a lot of that.
Yeah,
depending on how big how grand the OT network is, some of that stuff could be, life or death type stuff. Like if those systems can't communicate, people are going to get hurt at the workplace type thing. So yeah, it definitely makes sense.
I'm going to have to go with cable management on that one.
I mean, I don't know though, because like if you go in those CSP data centers, those cables are run pretty well. They're pretty organized.
Your virtual cable management is trash.
Yeah, that's true. I really can't argue with that.
Full on virtual cable dumpster fire, like 9 different colors, total rat's nest.
Yeah, we just rip it out when we don't want it anymore. It's pretty bad. We just clip the cables with the big scissors whenever we don't want them anymore.
You'll work for a cloud company. There is a sandbox account that's burning like $40,000 a month right now. I can guarantee you.
100%.
We distribute ours amongst the entire organization to get the 40,000. So yes, absolutely true.
Well, there's a ton of ways and a ton of different things that come to mind. But if I had to pick one, okay, I'm not going to use that one. I'll say routing. Routing's a good one. So this is relative. There's a lot of external factors here, but with like on-premises networking, and I'll preface this by saying, this is might not always be a good thing, but you are in full control over your routing topology. How many routes do you want to advertise? What do you want the next hop to be? Because on premises, you can get creative with traffic engineering. Okay, routing traffic from point A to point B. How do you want to do that? In cloud, not so much. You're limited to the system in which the cloud is built for you. A lot of flexibility doesn't exist. And I guess it really comes down to control over convenience, or vice versa. Again, completely relative.
I like that. There's no quotas on-prem, right?
Not really, other than the size of the box that you bought. How many routes? Right. Everything in cloud, it's like, okay, route table, VP, like all the different things have some limit that you're working within the confines of.
Yeah, no only limits, but it's it's funny that we talk about it like, oh, in the cloud it's great because the only routing protocol that's present is BGP, but it's also something that's not present in many places where there should be regular networking, right?
Yeah, I remember transitive routing when the first time I was ever trying to help out a cloud. This was before we even had cloud teams, like long time ago, and I could not wrap my head around it. Like, I'm in this VPC, I got these subnets, I want to route. And I want this other VPC to be my next hop to get to this other thing. Oh, can't do that. Something you take for granted in the data center, not existent in cloud unless you insert something else.
Yeah. I mean, that being said, Did you feel like routing is it actually a problem, or is it us, like the engineers at heart? For us, like just
the nerd knobs.
We don't have the nerd knobs. We want to be able to control this stuff and we can't. Is it a good problem or is it a bad problem? I guess I should say that.
I think it's a bad problem. I think it's gotten a lot better now with the likes of, where you work, Chris, and where I work. There's a lot of good startups that are innovating in the space, but thinking back, like the technical debt over the years, like site-to-site VPNs were the first thing I ever did. And it was just the site-to-site VPN from some box on-prem to a VPC. Multiple AZs, right. 2 tunnels. And then it was like the transit VPC design, which was maybe the worst design ever conceived. And then transit gateway came along and made life a little easier. Well, a lot easier, So yeah, there's been a progression there that cloud providers are trying to help, but it's definitely a problem because it pigeonholes you into these hub and spoke topologies everywhere, like per region, per cloud. You've got all these hubs, and since you can only, you're basically doing VPC or VNet peering back to the hub VPC where all your hybrid kit is to get you back out to, somewhere outside of that cloud. And yeah, it's just a design pattern that isn't, I don't think it's necessarily a good thing in all cases, but yeah, it's a trade-off, of course.
Network access control. So what's cool about, the cloud, what's good about it is like there's no layer 2. So you don't have like any of that kind of nonsense to deal with, but also you don't control things. So if you want a capability, it has to be packaged as a service by the provider, right? But like if you control the actual network, that means like when a device at the point of attachment, you can bring whatever fancy tooling you want to that, right? So you can say, oh yeah, I want you to have a certificate and I want your computer to have a certificate and you need to have this software and we're going to make you do MFA. And, oh yeah, I want you to stare into this, iris scanner. The point is you have complete freedom over what you want to pile on as far as, deciding what's going to be able to get access and pass packets.
Mm. You put me on the spot. What is something that works better on-prem than it does in the cloud? Trace route.
You know what? That's a good question. And I have to go to, because of my work experience, I'll have to say if it's something that is like HIPAA or regulated data like that, you need to bring that on-prem.
Yeah, I feel like a lot of those regulated data pieces, it was kind of easier to, you could always enforce it. You always had the option to just rip a cable out or something if you really need to in a, fire safe situation type thing. So yeah, it makes sense.
I mean, I think right now, if you're getting into generative AI and you want to run your own models, it is super painful and super hard to run these things on SageMaker, on Vertex AI, on Azure ML, machine learning, whatever. And I find that if you have a good graphics card, like I just bought an RTX 3080 and, things just run. It's less painful, and I've just not bought into this whole running your ML models or playing around with this stuff in the cloud.
How long do you see that lasting? Do you think that's going to be something that becomes usable soon, or do you feel it's hopeless?
I don't know. Like at the end of the day, you're going to have to run something, but whether you are actually going to use their tooling or use something cloud agnostic, what's the thing called that lets you? It's like pod something that allows you to pod runner, pod something, allows you to run your ML models. I feel like that's a lot easier because you can take your local environment and better replicate it in a cloud agnostic way. But yeah, I'm just not liking the the tooling in general for the online ones, and I don't have good hope for them because they keep changing it.
Well, there's also NVIDIA just announced like a way to run your like on your laptop, right? And I think we're going to start seeing more and more of that
Oh, the RTX
coming up
chat
very
thing?
quick.
I just
the
downloaded
RTX
it
chat.
yesterday. Yeah.
Yep.
Oh, so low latency applications worked much better on-prem than in the cloud. Things that, I mean, to go back to the monolithic application paradigm, things that were tightly coupled. And if one thing broke down, if everything was in one place, then you could quickly find out what that thing was and what the breakpoint was. It's much harder to do resilience type monitoring for monoliths up in the cloud. I might have worked for a military company whose name shall not be mentioned, that if their on-prem application was greater than 10 milliseconds, then the nuclear launch codes became corrupted. And that was a bad thing.
All right, here comes the third question. What is your cloud hot take?
All right, you guys ready for this one? Not every application needs to be modernized.
Oh my gosh, she went there.
I did go there. So there are a lot of instances where you have an app. It works perfectly fine the way that it's written. And maybe the platform needs to change. You can absolutely run that app in the cloud, but you don't necessarily need to completely rewrite the app from the bottom up, make it microservices, change your database, all of those things. I think one of the things that we as technologists sometimes downplay is we don't always think about the business side of that, the cost. And a lot of times it's an opportunity cost. If you're going to rewrite an application, just is it worth it to the business? Are you going to, if it's an application that needs to change and grow over time with your business and it's very core to what you do and you need new capabilities, there's a very strong case for modernization there. But if it's an app that does a thing, it does the thing you need it to do well. Oftentimes those apps can move to the cloud and run in VMs, can sometimes be modernized even into containers, and can even run in a serverless environment without modifying the application. And that's something that we don't talk a lot about.
I love it. Our mutual friend, Will Collins, did a talk a while back where I just loved like a slide he did. He basically had a picture of a bus. And it was like, he was explaining the story like he told his wife, oh, I got us a new family vehicle, right? And it was like a school bus instead of a minivan or something. So it's very fitting for.
Yep. Right tool for the job, right?
Yeah,
right
exactly.
tool for the job. What does the business need? What makes sense economically? And how do we continue to keep everything working while we also grow, change, and to use the other magic word, transform.
Yeah, I think that's good because it's like obviously there's a strong focus on things that we should do. We should modernize apps, but there's also you got to take it both ways, right? There's also things that you shouldn't do. If something's not part of your strategic roadmap, then you probably don't need to put in the effort now, and waste time and resources. So yeah, totally agreed.
There's a lot of value to the cloud, but I think a lot more folks should be building data centers than they think they should. I think a lot of people are failing to realize that the cloud is basically, pick one of bandwidth, compute, or storage. And a lot of people are using all three. And, paying twice X or 3X in OpEx against some CapEx.
Yeah, I think that's entirely valid, actually.
Do you think as all these, the AI talk right now, a lot of that's going on, do you think that companies are going to actually start building their own on-prem, stuff to run these AI workloads, or is that going to stay in the cloud?
I think it will eventually for two reasons. I think number one, in the long run, it will, but right now you can't buy a video card, so it doesn't matter.
Good luck.
Right? So
good luck.
Only the cloud companies can get them, so they're the only ones that are building. But I think number one, the cost is insane, the markup there. But number two, absolutely. I think a lot of it comes down to privacy, right? Like the data that's building and training your model is your core IP.
Yep.
Kind of wishy-washy on putting that through somebody else's model.
I wouldn't be surprised if the CSPs lean heavy into the idea of a walled garden model, though, if they haven't already. Like, here's your private sandbox of LLM.
I mean, you can
yeah.
do that today, right? You can take your own models and you can train them and refine them. But it's like anything else. Like, is it worth it? What's the value there? What's the return on investment? And I think what hasn't totally happened yet is people realizing that training is going to become crown jewels for the companies that get it right. And, you're not going to want to put all that data on your competitor's platform or even a place where it could potentially leak out. And again, like, this is some of that like cloud fear mongering that happened in the early days. Like, oh, you can't use an S3 bucket because what happens? Like, yeah, there is security. But I think for a lot of the companies, it'll be easier for them to build a cluster, run and train their own models, and then protect that model locally.
This is a real hard one. I got a lot of these, for the most shock factor, I'm just going to say artificial intelligence is massively overhyped. AI is beyond the shadow of a doubt. It's definitely a game changer in a lot of areas. But networking, though, an area of tech that you rely on to be deterministic. The investment in capital is going to be substantial. You're including the cost of all the resources, the training, the maintenance. We live in a world of cost and recouping ROI. So I think the economic considerations are going to challenge the notion that AI is universally viable for networking, especially beyond like the read-only and observability use cases. I think for read-only and observability, that's one thing, but I hear conversations sometimes, AI is going to be running the network in 2 years. It's going to be rerouting traffic and, I don't know about that. Good luck.
Yeah, I definitely see the kind of the advancements, at least like with how we operate, is like how we operate, like how we function in our day-to-day jobs. But the actual like acting on that within the system, the network, or whatever the compute virtualization system, that seems so far-fetched. Like it's only going to take one event for one C-suite executive to rip it right out. Be like, you're not doing
everything out. Yeah, 100%. And you got to think like this stuff is only as good as the data you're giving it. You give it too much data, your results are skewed. If you give it too little data, you're not going to get any outcomes out of it that you need. You got to feed it the right amount of data. There's all sorts of things that, we're still focused on, in the network side of the house, making sure internet's reliable and things like that, making sure DNS doesn't break. Okay. How long have we been trying to make sure that DNS doesn't break? Well, since I actually started working in this industry way back,
every day,
same problem every day.
AI needs to fix DNS. That's what needs to happen for sure.
It's I'm still like really salty that logging is so expensive. And I honestly think it's a situation where the federal government should probably step in and do something about it, because it creates an unnecessary security risk for customers.
My cloud hot take is that you have the ability to build whatever you desire because you have access to compute, you have access to networking, you have access to storage, you have access to databases, you have access to serverless as well as generative AI. The possibilities are pretty much endless in the cloud.
Cloud is dying. No, I'm joking. Cloud hot take. The first thing that comes to my mind off the cuff is I remember when network engineering, going to get your CCNA and all that kind of stuff, that was the hot thing to go do. Then it was cloud, and now it's AI. Yeah. That's my hot take. I think, these things kind of, unfortunately, I feel like come as fads here and there. And I think people are moving on from cloud and now it's AI. Oh, one thing that's always funny to me is the whole, at the end of the day, even though we say it's in cloud, it's still in a data center running on machines.
Yeah, just true. Out of your jurisdiction. I think kind of piggybacking on the first thing you said, I think cloud is also advertised as this thing that's so easy, and it's so not. It's so
not
complicated. There's so many things that go into it. Yes, there are things that are easier, but at the same time, there's also things you didn't have to worry about because the landscape is not the same, right? There's obviously levels of inherent security, you can call it, built into things that you don't have to
control.
Yeah, exactly.
You know, the other thing piggybacking off of that is the fact that money. A lot of people are moving off the cloud because it wasn't as inexpensive as they were made to believe. And I feel like with physical equipment on-prem, I think it was easier to calculate cost.
Yeah.
Cloud is a little bit hard, and you kind of just get slapped in the face with a bill and go, oh shit. So.
Yeah. Like
for sure. Right.
There's a reason FinOps is so big, right? There's an entire level of business about maintaining your cloud bill. I don't think that exists on-prem because it's always predictable from the OEMs you're working with, right? It's cut and dry.
Yeah, you just got a quote and there you go, right? There's no quote for, I'm going to spin up, a dev wants to spin up something to test it out. You don't get a quote to you that you get approved and signed off on, right?
That part. Yeah. And it gets spun up. Someone forgets to turn it off. They decided to try all the bells and whistles, and maybe good policies weren't set in place to check that kind of thing. And you get that, outrageous bill, and you're just like, wait a minute.
What is my cloud hot take? I mean, I think that I should probably do the thing that I'm most known for, which is about cloud certifications. And I think you don't need a cloud certification. And I would probably say cloud certifications are useless if you are trying to break into the cloud. And we really need to do something about this.
I have so many spicy hot takes.
You gotta pick one. I'm sorry.
Give us the hottest one.
Give us the hottest, spiciest.
The current paradigm for service creation in the cloud hyperscalers is not conducive to enterprise level systems. Creating multiple two pizza teams that each have a KPI of service and feature releases that oftentimes contradict each other is a really shitty way to get enterprise adoption for people that just want things to work.
How often are you seeing that happen? Is there a certain vertical?
Every day, constantly.
Okay.
I mean, if you are a brand new startup and you're figuring things out and you've got a couple of accounts and you're just trying to make things work and stand up, that's one thing.
Yeah.
If you are an enterprise consumer, a large Fortune 100 that has multiple thousands of microservices trying to work with each other and multiple software development teams that are trying to make things just go, and you have 200 plus services with different API interfaces, with cross-functional services that, Lambda does it this way, but Fargate does it that way. And the reason that is the case is because internally, the way to get promoted at a large hyperscaler is feature releases and shipping new features.
Ship the org chart, yeah.
Regardless of communicating with the other two pizza teams.
Yep.
Then it just turns into a big fucking mess.
All right, and let's round this out with the last question. What's the biggest hurdle you had to overcome personally when changing your mindset from how things are done on premises to how they're done in the cloud?
I think this one's twofold, and it's more an argument that I've commonly heard. One is that it's always more expensive to run on someone else's infrastructure. And you hear that a lot. Like, how can you run the same thing on somebody else's infrastructure and do it more cheaply? Economies of scale, all of that. But I think the other side of that conversation is that things have to run differently in the cloud. I'm of an age where I learned to do network security, network infrastructure in a particular way. You have a you have a gateway firewall that's on the edge of your network, and that provides all your security. There wasn't even a concept of a WAF or load balancer with an integrated security or DDoS. None of those things like existed back in the day. And I think what you have to begin to grasp is what the new components are and how you achieve the same capabilities with new technology, as opposed to, because the mistake I see a lot of folks make and a hurdle is, well, I have to have a L7 firewall appliance on the boundary of every VPC, for example. And I have to do that because I'm re-implementing the mental model that I have for on-prem in the cloud. And if you do that, it won't be cheaper and it won't work well, and you'll fail ultimately. So you have to embrace a whole new set of architectural principles, and you have to rethink about the components that you need to make things work. And it's not like, let's just virtualize this on-premise function and put it in the cloud. You have to embrace really a whole new set of primitives. There's still some fundamentals that are going to apply no matter what. But you really have to understand what a cloud architecture looks like as opposed to an on-premises architecture, and to reform how you think about what an architecture looks like.
I might need you to come back on when we do a talk about some government guidelines around like tick designs, because I agree, but man, there's some mandates out there that make that very, very difficult to deal with.
Well, and that can be an interesting problem, right? Because a lot of times your auditors are given a standard playbook for how something ought to look. Now, you can go and argue that although you're not using the same components, that your architecture still meets the compliance standard because you're using, technology Y instead of technology X. The thing is,
absolutely,
that's not an easy thing to do. And unless you have an organization committed to and leadership that understands well enough to argue why that's necessary, then the quote unquote easy button, and I put that in air quotes for a reason, is to just follow those old architectural patterns. But I put easy in air quotes because you're going to do the hard work on the front end or the back end, right? Like either you're going to do the hard work to re-architect, or you're going to do the hard work of maintaining and supporting the suboptimal system over the long haul. Neither of those things are easy. One is more painful for longer.
Nuking it from orbit is a totally valid answer in the cloud. And I think that was, we come, especially as a network engineer, like coming from this, like plan for the plan, review it past 8 people, review the plan that you passed by 8 people, review the plan for the plan that you passed by 8 people to review it, and then still get it wrong, and then stay up all night fixing the VPN tunnel where you actually just
still have a backup.
You flip the source to destination to the VPN, right? And now you're just like, I don't know, I did it like 6 times on my laptop and it worked, and then we just blew it up when it didn't work and everything's fine. Coming back to the, I think more people should be building data centers. That is the downside. You have to have toolings that allow you to have some of that mentality, but, moving fast and breaking things is really valuable when you can rebuild them even faster.
Lean into the ephemeral nature holistically. Yeah.
Troubleshooting Kubernetes is for losers.
This pod isn't working. That's when we got to blow it away and start over.
Yeah, that's right. Just new EKS cluster every hour on the hour.
Shake off all the bugs.
Somewhat related, Pete. I remember when you were going through your learning Kubernetes journey and you were posting a lot of stuff and you were trying to upgrade a cluster at one point. And it was like, now I see why people use managed clusters.
Fucking sucks.
Yes.
We had this engineering meeting, and we were talking about, our product is like this managed. It's managed cross plane. Think of like managed Terraform, but different. And they were like, trying to talk about the value of like the managed service, and like who here still runs a Kubernetes cluster, like as opposed to just using our platform. Everybody's hand goes up, and they're like, okay, who's still, things about the Kubernetes layer, a bunch of hands are still up. And I'm like, who still spins up their own Kubernetes cluster? And I was like, oh, just me. Like everybody else is running, like, they're like, I just run it on EKS
or AKS. Yeah.
And I was like, yeah, but I have a very fast, large computer that it's way faster for me to do that in Vagrant. It just ate a whole bunch of shit to get it to work the first time. You're like halfway through Kubernetes the hard way, and you're like, I fucking hate certificates. This is stupid. I don't want to do this anymore.
That's a really good question. For me, it was, I really think, like, looking back, and I still struggle with this sometimes, is this whole like scale out rather than scale up approach to like your design, and ultimately having like major self-control and scoping things out. So on-premises tech and culture, especially in the days of like ITIL change management practices on steroids, that led technologists to get as much as they could at the start of a project or an initiative. In cloud, you kind of want to go the opposite direction, and you want to start small and you want to scale horizontally. So instead of that one massive instance, you scale many smaller instances horizontally to meet demand. And then when that demand subsides, you dial things back down. It's very much, it goes against everything that I ever learned from everybody in the data center days when we were building things, which was we need to get as much as we can, as big as we can, as fast as we can. And, that's the direction. This is a complete opposite way in cloud.
I like that because it's the same for everyone. Right, like it's not just networking people; it's compute. It's like, because compute people are notorious. They're like, give me 24 CPUs for like this tiny little application that I'm building. So yeah, I like that because it is applicable everywhere.
I used to do the same thing when going to the compute folks for like network appliance stuff. Like, I remember we were prototyping some like IPAM, like an open source IPAM system. This was a long time ago. And then, like a new syslog thing. We want to do like syslog ng and like do filtering with syslogs before we punt them to something else. Oh, I'm getting the biggest VMs I can possibly get for that. Oh, we're going to need the whole house. You might as well just give us that whole hypervisor because we're going to need it. Not really.
Yeah, it's also difficult too because like that's obviously something that's preached very hard whenever you move to cloud, right? It's in CSP, unnamed, just well architected framework, name whoever it is. They all say to do that, right? But like if you're also wanting to leverage things like security from an ISV, like a particular firewall vendor, a lot of times they aren't there yet. With their virtualization stack in order to support that, right? Like the time that takes you to stand up a new, a scale out firewalls and bootstrap it and just push policy, the event's over. Like you didn't catch it at the right time.
Yeah, that's a big trade-off. You have to, a lot of times it's either we're going to deploy the firewalls in the cloud or we're going to deploy them as close to the cloud as we can in a colo. So go the big box approach and have that firewall actually even maybe doing the multi-cloud routing, or having like some other routers in the colo doing the multi-cloud routing, or hey, rolling with those virtuals in your hubs, all the hubs we talked about earlier. Yeah, go that direction.
Favorite model.
Yeah.
For me, like as a network engineer, I still struggle with the fact that there's no layer 2, right? Just that everything is, I can't help it. It's just like my brain just struggles to process that. And it's like you just got to take like that whole, everything below layer 3 and just lop it off and pretend like it doesn't exist. But I still struggle with it sometimes. Yeah.
The biggest hurdle that I had to overcome was logging into the console. When I'm working on routers and switches, I'm used to hopping into a router. I'm used to hopping into a switch, doing a show running config or a show IP route to see the routing table. I had to shift my mindset from, rather than doing that, either using the console or using something like AWS CLI to actually see what the configurations are in the region that I'm in.
Do you think your your automation kind of background, if you will, kind of helped with that transition as well?
I think automation did help me, since that when you learn to automate, you understand your networking, but you also think about the abstraction of the network. Let's say
Yeah.
like your routing table, rather than logging into a device and do a show IP route, you actually sending that via an API call, or you actually sending that through some type of SSH client like NetMiko or something. And so that kind of is an abstraction layer from actually being on a physical device. So doing that actually prepared me for the way I interact with automation in the cloud.
All right, so this goes back to the other question where I said it would probably answer this. There was no mindset change for me. What do you mean? If anyone remembers, my endpoint devices as a network engineer working on-prem was on ships. So I've kind of always worked in a space where I couldn't just go and like touch the equipment. So if I accidentally shut down a server, AD, something like that, I'm calling a captain or flying out to the ship to go turn that thing back on. So it wasn't a shift for me. I guess the only shift for me was learning where to do certain networking things on different cloud platforms. So, where I need to go inside the page. I can't even say that because I was using CLI with the stuff on the ship. So yeah, it wasn't a big mind shift for me, to be honest with you.
That works.
And you've kind of leaned in pretty hard to the DevOps side of the house as well,
Yes.
right? Has that been, how do you think that ties into it? Did you see that as a mindset shift? Obviously that operates a little bit differently than traditional network engineering.
Yes. First off, let's start with the fact that, and this is going to be a video I put out for my vlogging stuff. I never wanted to be a DevOps engineer. Let's start there. I had no desire to do it. I didn't study for it. It's just something I got put into at work. And so every day was learning on the job. I have touched databases more than I wanted to and had to dust off my SQL skills. I've had to learn how to automate a bunch of stuff and actually truly understand what DevOps is. And I just came to a revelation like maybe December-ish, this past December, where it finally clicked for me. As a DevOps engineer, my job isn't to do all the things. My job is to unblock my devs, teach them so they can go do the things. Yeah. And then they teach me about their stuff, which makes it easier for me to support them. And that's where that infinite loop actually comes in. And I happen to be on a project where DevOps, like the culture is amazing and we're actually doing DevOps. And once I figured out that part of it's not about me as a DevOps engineer doing all the things, but unblocking my devs so they can go do it, it made my life so much easier.
Yeah. So, I mean, my background is more of a developer. So my on-premise is more like, what was it like before you used a cloud service provider? And back in the day, we did not have all these more complex components like cloud networking. And I think that the largest hurdle for me to get into cloud or cloud service provider was actually to learn how to do basic IT networking. And once I overcame that, then I was able to jump right into cloud.
Yeah, that's a good point because, I mean, the table stakes are a lot higher, right? Like there's a lot more of a baseline foundation of things that you need to learn, like right off the bat. And I think that kind of ties into your hot take a little bit too. So for sure, I agree with that one.
Even more so now. Like even when I came in, it was just like I didn't want to even know what a subnet or CIDR blocks were.
I'm going to go back to the considerations around monitoring. When I was living on-prem, when things were on-prem, it was easier to visualize where the failures could happen and to go trace them out. When you move up to the cloud, there's a layer of abstraction that can get in the way of good troubleshooting methodology until you actually understand how the things are fundamentally connected to each other. Once you cross that chasm, then you are able to troubleshoot and understand the monitoring the differences in the monitoring perspectives of cloud versus on-prem.
That's really good. I mean, that's a good answer. I would 100% agree with that. So much easier to find your blast radius on-prem than it is in the cloud and work back from that.
If you're staring at a rack and you've got your switches at the top and the router right beneath that, and then everything else underneath that, then you know where you're going to go.
Yeah, that's really good.
Yeah, I mean, do you think there's a lot of pushback from people converting infrastructure from on-prem to cloud just based on that particular piece alone? Because at the end of the day, SLAs are all, fine and dandy, but like they can't necessarily save your business, depending on how catastrophic the event is, right? But yeah, do you see that being like one of the major friction points for people as well? Just that particular monitoring aspect alone?
So I've been party to a lot of cloud migrations. That was my first specialty when I went into consulting, is getting people to consistently and with a lot of forethought move systems up into the cloud. And honestly, that was the last thing that they worried about. The first things that they worried about were the sillier things. Not sillier. I mean there were the things that fear and lack of knowledge of how the cloud operated was the first stumbling block. Convincing people to worry about monitoring and troubleshooting and understanding all of that was far further down the line than just getting the person to even buy into the concept of cloud. I will say that a lot of folks that are around my age were very reluctant to, I'm not going to say believe in the cloud, but to be bought into it. I think a lot of it was just a reluctance to just pick up a new stack, to try to have to, I got to learn another thing. I just spent the last 10 years of my life doing VMware stuff and data center stuff. Why do I have to do everything through an API now? So that was a much bigger hurdle than the actual real hurdle of trying to figure out why things break in the cloud versus on-prem.
Yeah, 100%. Fear, uncertainty, and doubt. FUD is always the scariest thing, especially in the at the tail end of 2020, which the tech treadmill was just like, oh, add another thing, add cloud, right?
Yeah, more things, more network automation, cloud, Python, like all this other stuff, right? Anyway.
Especially when the interested parties are trying to inject even more FUD into it. Hyperscalers vying for land grabs among companies, on-prem service providers trying to maintain their relevance and continue selling hardware to each other. I always tried to figure out where the money was going to land before I asked somebody a good question about something. If I ask AWS a question about whether or not I should move my things to the cloud, if they start getting dollar signs in their eyes, then I know, okay, well, you might have a biased opinion about this. So it's hard to get an unvarnished, unfiltered truth out of somebody that's getting paid by that company.
All right, and with that, we are going to go ahead and wrap up the episode today. So hope you enjoyed this. Hopefully this was a fun exercise to kind of do something like this, where we don't know exactly how it's going to come together, but hopefully it was a slam dunk. But once again, just want to say a quick thank you to everyone that's done anything at all to support the show in the last year. So whether that should be listening one time, maybe you never came back again, that's fine. Maybe this is the first and the last time you listened to the podcast ever. That's fine too. Really, from the bottom of our hearts, really appreciate it. Really want to grow the show and really resonate with the audience and talk to more people. That's kind of the thing. We really want to talk to as many of you guys as we possibly can, and showcase things that you may not be seeing in the field or talking about, et cetera. So we would love to get in touch with every one of you guys. So we're looking forward to doing this again next year. Hopefully we have a bigger and better idea for next year. We're gonna it's gonna keep happening every year. It's going to be a crazier episode. We're going to figure this out. So
it's better and better.
Yeah. So with that, once again, thanks everyone. And if you enjoyed this, make sure to watch on YouTube. One of the responses in the survey was that people were joking that they didn't even know that we had a YouTube channel. I don't know if that was a joke or if that was a real comment, which it might be real.
That was a sizable amount too. It wasn't
Yeah.
like one person. There was a
Right.
decent amount of people that don't know we have a YouTube channel. We have a YouTube channel. So if you haven't been watching us on YouTube, like you can actually see our faces and well, okay, that's probably why they haven't been watching.
Exactly. Yep. So just blur out the portion of the screen where me and Tim are in, and you can just watch Alex, and you'll probably enjoy yourself way better.
Or you can watch Tim's beard grow in and out every single episode.
That's a good point. On this episode, you probably, since we recorded all these at separate times, you probably see Tim's beard constantly changing lengths between the videos. So that would be...
Well, I don't have a clock on the wall behind me, so this is like the next best thing.
Tim's going to start recording with a copy of today's newspaper next to his face every time. All right. And with that, we'll actually wrap up. Thanks again, guys. We'll talk to you next time. Bye. Hi, everyone. It's Chris, and this has been the Cables2Clouds podcast. Thanks for tuning in today. If you enjoyed our show, please subscribe to us in your favorite podcatcher, as well as subscribe and turn on notifications for our YouTube channel to be notified of all our new episodes. Follow us on socials at Cables2Clouds. You can also visit our website for all of the show notes at cables2clouds.com. Thanks again for listening, and see you next time.